My grandfather's business partner handed me an envelope in the parking lot after the funeral and told me not to open it in front of my family. I almost didn't listen to him. My grandfather built a small construction company from nothing over 40 years. He was the kind of man who remembered every worker's kid's name, who showed up to job sites on his days off just to check on people, who kept a handwritten ledger even after everyone switched to software because he said numbers meant more when you wrote them yourself. When he got sick, the business kept running because his guys loved him enough to hold it together without being asked. He died on a Tuesday in March. 61 people came to the service. I counted because it's the kind of thing he would have done. I was 26, the youngest grandchild, the only one who'd moved back to town after college. For 3 years, I drove him to chemotherapy every other Thursday. We'd stop at the same diner on the way home and he'd order coffee he wasn't supposed to have and I'd pretend not to notice. He talked about my grandmother, about the early years of the business, about mistakes he'd made that he'd never told anyone else. I didn't record those conversations. I just listened. His partner, a man named Gerald who'd known my grandfather for 30 years, pressed that envelope into my hand and said, "He wrote this when he could still write clearly. Read it alone first." Then he walked to his car. I put it in my jacket pocket. Inside the reception hall, my family was already dividing. My grandfather had 3 children. My father, his 2 sisters, and their various spouses had been circling the question of the business for months before he even passed. There was real money involved. The company, the property it sat on, equipment, contracts already in place. My aunts had brought their own accountant to the funeral. I noticed because he was the only person there in a suit who hadn't known my grandfather's name. The will reading was 4 days later. The attorney laid it out plainly. The business and its assets were to be transferred to me, with a salaried position created for my father if he wanted it. My aunts received the lake house and a cash sum that was, by any reasonable measure, generous. It didn't matter. My Aunt Carol stood up before the attorney finished the sentence. She said I had manipulated a sick old man. She said I'd isolated him. She looked at my father and said, "You let your son do this to our family." My father said nothing. He was looking at the table. My other aunt was quieter, but her husband wasn't. He used the word predatory. He said it twice. I sat with it because I knew what the envelope said. I'd read it the night before, alone in my car outside my apartment building, and I'd cried in a way I hadn't even cried at the funeral. My grandfather had written 4 pages. He described, in specific detail, what the last 3 years had looked like from his side. The Thursday drives, the diner. The fact that I'd learned enough about the business to have real conversations with him about it. Not because I wanted anything, but because it was his life's work and he wanted someone to understand it before he was gone. He wrote that I was the only person who had never once, in 3 years, mentioned what would happen to the company after he died. He wrote, "I am not rewarding you. I am trusting you." I didn't read it out loud in that room. I didn't defend myself. Gerald had read it. The attorney had read it. That was enough. My aunts didn't speak to me for 8 months. My father called 2 weeks later and apologized quietly over the phone. I told him the job was real if he wanted it. He took it. I kept every single worker my grandfather had employed. I kept the handwritten ledger system until I understood it well enough to know what to keep and what to update. I learned the names of every worker's kid. There's a photo of my grandfather on the wall in the main office. Some of the older guys still say good morning to it when they come in. I've started doing it too.